How does a group ostensibly founded on spiritual principles and community fitness devolve into a highly sophisticated transnational criminal syndicate? Imagine a sanctuary meant for discipline and faith, slowly twisting into a shadowed underworld where loyalty is sworn not to a higher power, but to a ruthless code of silence. This is the baffling mystery at the heart of St. Michael's Christian Brothers Fight Club in Sydney, Australia. On the surface, it appeared to be an ordinary athletic organization, a place where young men gathered to train and compete. Yet, behind closed doors, it operated with the rigid, unwavering intensity of an outlaw motorcycle gang. There was no formal hierarchy, no patched vests to identify its members to the public, but the demands placed upon those who joined were absolute. Initiates were required to take a solemn oath of allegiance. The rules were clear and unforgiving. Members were forbidden from engaging in petty internal disputes or clashing over romantic interests. They hosted underground battle nights, forging a bond of iron and secrecy that bound the men together. It was within this highly intense, deeply loyal environment that Antonio Bagnato, also known in certain circles as Tony Bang, cultivated his influence. Antonio was a skilled kickboxer, a man whose physical prowess was matched only by his dangerous ambitions. While the Fight Club provided a veneer of legitimate athletic pursuit, it simultaneously served as a fertile breeding ground for a dark, clandestine network of narcotics and organized illicit activities. Antonio did not merely participate in the club. He embodied the severe, uncompromising nature of its hidden agenda. As his involvement in the illicit trade deepened, the spiritual foundation of St. Michael's was completely eclipsed by the harsh realities of criminal enterprise. The strict code of conduct that once aimed to foster brotherhood became a tool for control, ensuring that any business conducted in the shadows remained entirely hidden from law enforcement. This was not a community of athletes. It was a highly organized fraternity of enforcers and operatives. The loyalty forged in the sweat and exhaustion of the ring was about to be tested in the most extreme, heart-wrenching ways imaginable. When a seemingly minor financial dispute arose, the very brotherhood meant to protect its members would instead be weaponized, setting into motion a tragic and fatal act that would echo across international borders. Investigators would soon uncover the unfathomable truth behind this devastating timeline. In the complex web of organized syndicates, loyalty is a currency far more valuable than cash. But for 25-year-old Bradley Dillon, a devoted father from Sydney, a mere $2,000 would become the catalyst for an unfathomable tragedy. The dispute began innocently enough, rooted in family loyalty. Bradley's sister, Cassie, had generously loaned funds to her former partner, Adriano Riccio, hoping to support his rehabilitation journey. When Adriano stubbornly refused to return the money, Bradley felt a profound duty to step in and make his sister whole. Seeking leverage, he reached out to men he believed could mediate the situation: Antonio Bagnato and his cousin, Diego Carbone, a known associate of the St. Michael's Fight Club. It was a seemingly logical move to ask these imposing figures for assistance in recovering a simple debt. However, Bradley was completely unaware of the hidden allegiances operating beneath the surface. Adriano was also intimately connected to the very same spiritual brotherhood. Bound by their strict clandestine code of conduct, Antonio and Diego made a chilling choice. They would not assist the desperate brother. Instead, they chose to protect their fellow club member, setting the stage for a heart-wrenching betrayal. On the brisk evening of August 11, 2014, Bradley received a cryptic, yet hopeful text message, directing him to an underground parking garage beneath a local establishment in the suburb of Lightshut. Believing this was the exact moment that debt would finally be settled, he walked willingly into a carefully orchestrated trap. As the young father descended the concrete stairs into the dimly lit subterranean structure, the atmosphere shifted from anticipation to sheer terror. Investigators later pieced together the harrowing timeline of the ambush. Without warning, Bradley was subjected to a severe, highly coordinated assault. The perpetrators utilized both sharp implements and a 9mm firearm to inflict intense, fatal injuries. Desperate for survival, he managed to break away, fleeing toward the vehicle ramp, even as projectiles struck his lower extremities. In a final, agonizing display of human endurance, Bradley staggered out onto the pavement of Lord's Road before ultimately collapsing. He tragically lost his life right there on the cold asphalt, leaving behind a grieving family. As witnesses spotted two shadowed figures sprinting away from the crime scene, authorities were left to unravel a devastating act of ultimate betrayal. While investigators in New South Wales meticulously combed through the evidence at the Leichhardt crime scene, the mastermind behind the fatal act was already vanishing like a ghost. Just days after the tragic loss of Bradley Dillon, Antonio Bagnato boarded a flight to Southeast Asia, slipping beyond the immediate reach of Australian jurisdiction. He sought refuge in the vibrant, chaotic coastal city of Pattaya, Thailand, a place where reinventing oneself was as easy as paying the right price. On the surface, Antonio maintained his guise as a fitness entrepreneur, establishing a new boxing gym that echoed the intense environment of his Sydney past. Yet this facility was merely a front. Beneath the sweat and heavy bags, he was aggressively expanding his underworld footprint, deeply embedding himself into transnational smuggling routes. It was here in the humid tropics that Antonio aligned himself with a highly formidable figure, Wayne Schneider. A former Hells Angels associate from Sydney, Wayne had relocated to Pattaya several years prior, building a sprawling, fiercely guarded narcotics empire. The sheer scale of Wayne's operations was truly unfathomable. International law enforcement agencies suspected his network was intricately linked to a staggering $1.5 billion global trafficking bust, moving literal tons of illicit substances across international waters. In this high-stakes environment, Antonio initially served as Wayne's personal bodyguard and trusted business partner. The two men were tightly bound by their shared Australian roots and mutual financial ambitions, with Wayne even holding significant financial stakes in Antonio's newly minted fitness facility. However, the illicit trade is an exceptionally volatile arena, driven by relentless paranoia and an insatiable hunger for control. When you operate in a shadow economy, where disputes cannot be settled in a courtroom, disagreements over massive sums of money often escalate with terrifying speed. As the Hells Angels established an official chapter in the Thai resort town in 2015, the local underworld grew increasingly crowded and fiercely competitive. The once lucrative partnership between Antonio and Wayne began to silently fracture under the crushing weight of commercial disputes and deep-seated mistrust. Antonio, harboring ambitions to build his own independent syndicate, modeled after his Sydney brotherhood, slowly transitioned from a loyal protector to a dangerous rival. The psychological tension between the two men reached a boiling point. In a world where millions of illicit dollars can vanish as quickly as human lives, a catastrophic collision between the former allies was no longer a mere possibility, was an absolute, impending certainty, setting the stage for a highly complex investigation that would soon captivate two separate nations. The illusion of absolute security is a dangerous comfort in the criminal underworld. For Wayne Schneider, his fortified Pattaya residence was supposed to be an impenetrable fortress against the numerous enemies his vast narcotics network had inevitably created. However, on the chilling night of November 30, 2015, that illusion was violently shattered. The timeline of this baffling mystery begins when vigilant security personnel stationed at the property observed a deeply unsettling scene. Under the cover of darkness, a group of masked individuals swiftly and methodically orchestrated a highly calculated extraction. They forcibly transferred the prominent syndicate figure into a waiting vehicle, setting off an urgent, desperate search by local authorities. As investigators later painstakingly reconstructed the harrowing sequence of events, a picture of severe misconduct and targeted retribution began to emerge. Law enforcement deduced that Antonio Bagnato, driven by escalating commercial disputes and a deeply rooted financial grievance, had enlisted 4 accomplices to execute this brazen kidnapping. The initial confrontation was an intense display of physical violation. It was reported that Antonio personally maintained strict restraint over his former associate, while the hired enforcers utilized blunt implements, including a baton and metal knuckle guards, to inflict severe harm. The sheer ruthlessness of the act underscored the incredibly high stakes of their fractured business relationship. The ordeal did not conclude at the Pattaya residence. The victim was quickly transported to a secondary secluded rental property secured specifically by Antonio. According to extensive testimony from Detective Sergeant Paul Rowe, the prevailing investigative theory suggests Wayne was likely still clinging to life upon arrival at this clandestine location. Inside, the tragic sequence continued as the captive was firmly confined to a stainless steel medical chair, subjected to further intense coercion. In a chilling display of negligence, the perpetrators allegedly abandoned the severely injured man, leaving him completely unattended in the dark. Upon their return, the syndicate members made a grim discovery: their captive had ultimately lost his life. Panic seemingly set in, abruptly shifting their objective from extortion to a frantic cover-up. The assailants stripped the deceased of his belongings and hastily concealed his remains in a rushed excavation in the nearby province of Satahip. When Thai authorities unearthed the tragic scene the following day, utilizing unconventional mobile phone photography to document the site, the coroner officially attributed the fatal event to severe blunt force trauma. The hunter had become the hunted, leaving investigators to follow a trail of undeniable evidence. The grim discovery in Satahip sent immediate, resounding shockwaves throughout the entire transnational underworld, prompting an unprecedented and sweeping crackdown by Thai authorities on the outlaw motorcycle syndicates operating within their borders. Sensing the rapidly closing investigative net, Antonio Bagnato orchestrated a desperate flight across the rugged border into neighboring Cambodia, relying on the clandestine networks that had once fueled his illicit ambitions. However, geographical borders are merely invisible lines on a map to determined investigators. A highly coordinated international dragnet, involving both Thai and Australian federal authorities, was swiftly mobilized. Within a matter of mere days, his desperate bid for ultimate freedom completely evaporated, as he was swiftly apprehended and decisively extradited back to Thailand to formally face the consequences of his extreme actions. The subsequent legal proceedings in the coastal city of Pattaya were intensely dramatic. Appearing before a tightly packed courtroom, secured in heavy ankle restraints, Antonio faced the crushing weight of judicial scrutiny alongside accomplices, including 22-year-old Tyler Gerard. Utilizing advanced DNA analysis and crucial eyewitness testimony provided by the residential security team, Thai magistrates initially handed down the harshest possible penalty for his commanding role in the severe misconduct and the subsequent fatal act. Although this severe judgment was eventually adjusted upon formal appeal in late 2018 to a 3-year term specifically focused on the physical assault, the overarching narrative of criminal accountability was far from concluded. The global machinery of justice is remarkably patient, and another reckoning awaited him across the ocean. Back in Sydney, the heart-wrenching loss of the young father Bradley Dillon remained a deeply open wound and a burning priority for dedicated homicide detectives. For 8 long years, local investigators worked quietly but relentlessly behind the scenes, meticulously assembling an airtight legal case while fostering essential partnerships with overseas law enforcement agencies. Their unwavering dedication finally culminated in July 2022. In a deeply poignant resolution to this complex two-continent saga, Antonio was officially extradited from Thailand back to Australian soil to finally answer for the tragedy in Leichhardt. Escorted on a direct international flight from Bangkok by seasoned investigators, he touched down at Sydney International Airport, his long journey concluding within the walls of a local police station. Authorities publicly emphasized a powerful, uncompromising message: those who choose to engage in such devastating behavior will inevitably be tracked down and held accountable. The shattered illusions of a spiritual brotherhood and the pursuit of illicit empires ultimately crumbled, leaving behind only a profound testament to the inescapable reach of international law enforcement. The shadows can only conceal the dark truth for so long, before justice finally offers closure to families enduring unfathomable loss.